Gareth Hughes.
We've heard a couple of excellent calls by Grant Robertson and Steve Chadwick. I'm sure we'll have some excellent calls from the member Darren Hughes later. But I do want to disagree with one part which Grant Robertson talked about, which was that this isn't going to be discussed over the summer barbecues. I, for one, being particularly geeky, will be talking about this at my summer barbecues. Oh, and Judith Collins. Maybe we'll be at the same barbecue. But, you know, there's going to be a whole sector of the country actually talking about this at the summer barbecues. It's the historians, the archivists, those involved in the science and technology sector. They will be talking about this. And Steve Chadwick is right. Some of these people are feeling insulted professionally by what's happening in this bill. I said I'm geeky. It's true. I've been campaigning this year to stop library fee introductions in libraries in Taranaki and Tauranga, introduced an amendment to the Local Government Act to ensure free access to library books because it's just so important. Our libraries are our community hubs, and the National Library is the hub of our country. It's the host of our nation's intellect, our creativity, our entertainment. It's an amazing source, and particularly important to those 3,000 other libraries around the country supplied by this National Library. So at these summer barbecues, what are the questions being asked? One of the questions is, well, why are we doing it? There's a relevant question, why are we doing this under urgency, but why are we doing this full stop? When you look at the Cabinet paper which sparked this, the National Library and Archives New Zealand were described as well-regarded institutions. The Library and Archives Association New Zealand wrote in their submission, the structural changes should enhance rather than detract the many services provided by the National Library that are enjoyed by New Zealanders today. The rationale for the merger is superficial, the savings seem to be minimal, and inevitably there will be a loss of productivity during and after such a major restructuring. The key question, and something I've noticed has been absent in the Cabinet papers, absent from the government officials, absent from the Minister talking about this, is what's going to be the impact for library users? It's amazing, in a bill which is talking about library users and archive users, there's hardly any mention of what the improvements are going to be to those who access the National Library. There's no mention of this. There's no mention of how we're enshrining best library practice in this bill. Professionalism doesn't matter. I want to touch on 4 points to do with Part 2. First, I want to look at the role of the National Librarian. Secondly, I want to look at the technology and digitalisation debate. Thirdly, look at the overseas image and the impact this bill will achieve on that. And then fourthly, ask the question why. Firstly, to look at the National Librarian, this is changing the role seriously. It's reducing them from an executive to an employee. It's putting them in a third-tier relationship. One comment on the Select Committee was, it's like being dropped from the All Blacks and moving down to a provincial second 15. What we're seeing is that the National Librarian dropping in mana, dropping in influence, dropping in its ability to actually talk to and convince the Minister of the need for action. When it comes to the Turnbull Library, it's even dropped further, even worse than the provincial team, maybe to a high school first 15 bench, dropping down to a fourth tier. Dropping down to the fourth tier. Ironically, the guardians of the Turnbull Library are going to have more access to the Minister than the Chief Librarian has under this bill. The Green Party today will be supporting two and many excellent supplementary order pages by the Labour Party. They're changing to subclause to clause 25, which is going to bring back access to the Minister. And I'm thinking of the Minister when I'm supporting this bill because it's important the Minister gets the best possible advice. He doesn't want to be heard from given the lowdown on the National Library by a dry Chief Executive of the Department of Internal Affairs. He wants to hear from someone with fire in his belly, someone with a bit of passion about libraries, for the importance of libraries. And I'm thinking of the Minister, and I hope the National Party supports this, because the Minister needs all the advice he can get, and I support that. Likewise, the public needs all the good advice they can get, and we'll be supporting the SOP changing Clause 28A. What this bill is going to be doing in Part 2 is changing that relationship with the Minister. We can write all we want in the legislation about ensuring the independence and the statutory independence in the bill, but the reality is it's going to come down to the people who are in the positions. Who is going to be the Department of Internal Affairs Chief Executive? Who will be the National Librarian? And how are they going to work together? It's a false premise that because the Department of Internal Affairs and the National... Mr Chair.
I call Gareth Hughes.
It's a false premise because they do broadly or similar materials that they should be merged together. Conglomeration can be good, but in this case it seems to be conglomeration for conglomeration's sake. When we look at the technology, we need to actually take a hat off to the National Library because these excellent and hard-working Kiwis are world leaders in this field. It's not a huge proportion of their income deals with digitisation, but they are leaders in the field already. If it ain't broke, let's not try and fix it. I'm a fan of digitisation personally, and I think we should be digitising as much as we can. But this isn't the major rationale for literally pulling an independent department and being taken over by the Department of Internal Affairs. I've heard no reason presented by anyone why digitisation needs to be in conglomerated departments. Already the National Library is sharing information, things like the EPIC database, the Matapihi website. They're working with other government departments in backroom service provisioning. When it comes to digitisation, the key issue, like many things in life, it simply comes down to cold hard cash. If we want to see more digitisation of our national treasures in New Zealand, this government needs to be putting more cash into it. It can't do this on the cheap. This isn't just a convenient way of looking like we're acting. If they're serious about this, they need to be putting more cash in, not shuffling the deck chairs. Looking at our overseas image, this is going backwards. A third-tier position for our National Librarian isn't best practice. Looking at Leanza, they say we're going to be losing our long-standing, lose our standing as a major cultural and heritage organisation for New Zealand, which will have impacts nationally and internationally. Why are we doing this? Ultimately, it's all because we want to have less government departments to remember. It's all about trimming the state sector and slashing the burn. Dr. Don Gilling points out that in fact there are 28 departments and programs out of 69 that were funded in the last financial year that are actually smaller than the National Library and 16 departments smaller than Archive New Zealand. The fact that these departments are small isn't a robust argument for being taken over by this new super department, the Department of Internal Affairs. And what I say is, watch out all those 16 and 28 smaller departments. Stephen Joyce is coming, and ultimately what we might have is one super department under Minister Stephen Joyce. Kia ora.
Mr Chair.